Hello everyone. Today we'll talk about Acts chapter 25 from verse 23.
천부장과 성주 높은 사람들과 함께 시몬세를 오고 베스도의 명으로 바울을 데려오니 베스도가 말하되
And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and principal of men of the city, and Fetus commandment Paul was brought forth. And Fetus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed himself, who hath appealed to Augustus, have determined to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my Lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and especially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had I might have somewhat to write. As Jews were trying to kill Paul, the captain of 1,000 met Felix and Fetus, and he met King Agrippa and preached the gospel to them. This is the scenery where he did that. Myself too, last year I visited South America in the month of February, and Colombia, Bolivia, Costa Rica, Paraguay. I visited 4 countries. Actually, there, I was supposed to meet the president of El Salvador. I thought of meeting the president of El Salvador, but actually then he had other preoccupation then and couldn't see me, and instead I met 4 presidents of other countries, and I met the 4 presidents, and I preached the gospel to them, and we had such a graceful time. When I think about this, back then, I was not a criminal, or I met him with all freedom and liberty, and they gave me more than 1 hour to speak to one another. And I was able to preach the gospel to them. And all IYF was doing, we discussed about our activities of IYF, and I was able to preach the word gospel of Christ. And afterwards, I was able to meet the president of Bolivia, and he came back. We discussed by video chatting. He asked me many spiritual questions. So we had good discussion. So meeting those kings and or captain of 1,000, I didn't meet them with the status of criminal, but I met them as a VIP, as an invited guest. Although Paul met them as a sinner, although the meeting went pretty much the same. But when I think about this, can I compare myself with Paul? No way, right? And one thing that I cannot compare myself with Paul is that Paul went through a lot of hardship and pain, and there were so many people who was threatening him, and people even stoned him, and people thought he was died, and he brought him out of the city and abandoned him. And when he went to Jerusalem, they were trying to stone him to death. That's when the captain of 1,000 came to save him. If he had come about 10 minutes later, he would have been stoned to death already. So as he went through all that difficulties, God let Paul meet the heads of states of different heads of state, and he was able to preach the gospel to them. This was so amazing to see. When I first met the president of Paraguay, it was our first meeting with the head of state, and the ambassador of Paraguay called me and told me that the president was coming, and I have to welcome him well, but we don't have enough budget. But as the president likes music, but if we could organize a music concert, that would be great. So could you please send us gracias choir so that we can have this music concert? So that's how we began our program, and I gave him the book titles, The Secret of Forgiveness of Sin and Being Born Again.
난 며칠 후에 저를 보고 파라과이 오라고
And after meeting,
하셨는데 대통령한테 정중하게 편지를 써서
he invited me officially to come,
내년 2월달 내가 파라과이 가니까
but I
그때 이렇게
wrote him an official letter and told him that I was going to Paraguay
다음 해
the following year in the month of February, so I asked him if I could see him there then.
대통령 초청으로 국빈이 돼가지고
But I went to see him by the invitation of the president, so when I went there, because I was the national guest, all the treatment was different.
경찰들이 경비를 서주고 어디
And
가면
whenever I go out, they would escort me, and
제가 그런 걸 처음 받아봤어요.
it was my first time being treated like that.
대통령 만나기 하루 전날
One day before meeting the president,
전화를 했습니다.
the chief secretary called me and asked me how many minutes I had with the president. They said I had 40 minutes with the president.
이유는 복음을 전하러
So the reason why I'm meeting the president was to preach the gospel, no other reason. And
그래서 우리가 가는 사람도 줄이고 가는 사람들 아무
so we reduced the number of people who were going there,
답을 해라. 그리고
and
복음을 전했습니다. 그래서 대통령께서 음악을 좋아하시다 합창단 데려와서
because the president likes music, choir music, our choir.
나머지 인사하면 한 10분 정도 예상하고 인사 한 5분 하고 15분 되니까 25분이 되는데
So we had 40 minutes, but as we greeted, and
되도록
I only had about 40 minutes.
이말 넣었다.
And the day before, I organized how I was going to talk to the president.
아무것도 아니고 그냥 복음을 전하기 시작했어요.
I'm nothing, and actually, I just wanted to preach the gospel.
파라과이를
And I told him, Mr. President, as you are ruling over Paraguay, I want Paraguay to be blessed.
사도행전 13장 22절에 보면은
And when you see Act 13, verse 22, there it says,
성경에 말해 다윗을 왕으로 세우시고 전가에 가라사 내가 이세한 다윗을만 내 마음
when I see Jesse, son of David, he's a man after mine own heart, it says.
다윗은 목동했는데 왕이 될 수 있었던 것은 하나님과 마음이 같았기 때문에
The reason why David could become the king,
가장 행복한
although he was a shepherd, it was because
성경을 읽고 성경에서 하나님 마음을 알고
he was one-hearted with God. So those who read the Bible, those who become one-hearted with God,
공부한 사람 공부 많이 한 사람 그 사람 별로 관심이
God is not interested in those who are smart or good,
사람이
but God
가장 마음을 쏘고 계십니다.
God is looking to those who are one-hearted with God.
하나님이 다윗을 들어 이야기.
Because David had one heart with God, because Paul had one heart with God, it was easy for God to work through them.
저도 제가
Myself too, as I do my ministry,
다른 무엇보다 하나님의 마음을
more than anything else, when I come to discover the heart of God, I can have the firm faith in God that is going to help me, and I can see Him helping me in many things.
각하에게 하늘 같은 마음을 갖게 되기를 바랍니다.
I told him that I hope that you would have the same heart as God,
이야기해.
and I talked about how one can have the same heart as God.
파라과이 베르난도 루고 대통령
Back then, the president of Paraguay, President Fernando Lugo, he was ex-priest. He was former priest, and actually priests, they know the Bible pretty well.
전했는데
And I preached the gospel,
저는 막 잊을 수 없는 것은
something I cannot forget.
이렇게 어떻게 하실 줄을 모르더라고요. 설렘 내 손을 꽉
He was so touched, and he held my hands tight.
그렇게 감격해 하고 감격.
He was so touched.
대통령께서 저하고 면담을 마치고 난 뒤에
After the meeting with me, the president,
기자실 면담을 했다.
all these reporters, they had meeting with the president.
파라과이 국민들에게 하고 싶은 이야기가
And with the reporters, he had interviewed, and he said that there's something that I want to tell the people of Paraguay, inform the people of Paraguay. Although I once worked as a priest,
있는데 나는 한 여자를 너무
but I loved one woman so much.
신부가 결혼해서 안 되는데
Although it's not allowed for a priest to get married, but I loved him so much, but I have a son
하나님 내 죄를
with
다
her.
사해 주셨는데
Although God washed all my sins,
파라과이 시민들도 내
I hope that all the people of Paraguay will also forgive me.
그 기자에게 그 얘기를 하셨어요.
So they had that interview,
근데 그날 막 세계가 막 완전히
and that day, the whole world,
뉴스로 전달.
it was like top news of the whole world.
파라과이에서
In Paraguay, he became the president that loves his people the most.
그러셨어요. 제가 한 대통령이 구원을 받아서 구원을 받고 너무 감사.
When I see one president receiving forgiveness of sin, receiving salvation and changing, I was so thankful. I've met 27 presidents, and those that I meet often, I meet them maybe 5, 6 times.
하나님 그분들이 예수님을 믿고 난 뒤에
After meeting Jesus,
달라지는 걸 봐.
I see them changing.
바울이 왕들을 만날 때,
When Paul met
바울이
kings,
총독을 만날 때, 바울이 정말 그 천부장을 만날 때는
when Paul met the captain of 1,000, he met them as a criminal.
이번 그 파라과이 대통령 그리고 나머지 그 세 분 대통령
And 3 other presidents. And when I met them last February last year, most of them they received salvation,
너무너무 감사.
and I was so thankful.
대통령께서는
Especially the president of Bolivia.
영상으로 한국에 온 데도 영상으로 상담하면서
We had fellowship even when I came back to Korea. We had spiritual fellowship via online meeting. So this is not comparable.
저는 정말 대통령 만날 때
So when I met the president,
첫날 그 파라과이 대통령 처음 만났을 때 제가 25분 동안 복음을 전하고
I preached the gospel for 25 minutes, and we spent 40 minutes with the president. We came out.
10분 동안 차를 타고 돌아오는데
But on my way back, after about 10 minutes later, the chief secretary called me
대통령께서 오늘
and told me that the president was going to join our IF camp that evening. That night, I sat next to the president, and he took part in our program, and I was able to speak before the president. And after Christmas cantata that night, he stayed until late,
정말 축하해 주시고
and he congratulated our choir.
그래서 제가 파라과이 갈 때마다
So each time I go to Paraguay,
믿으면
he would spend time with me. But following year, he caught cancer
상원 의원 한번
with one of a member of the Senate.
가서 치료를 받았는데
They went to Brazil for the treatment.
대통령께서 브라질 그 상원 의원은
But the senator of Paraguay, he died in Brazil during treatment.
죽음 직전까지 갔는데
The president almost died,
스스로 살리셔서
but God saved him,
계속 대통령직을 감당할 수 있도록 하는
and he helped him so that he could continue his work as a president.
하나님께서 저는 바울하고 비교가 안 되는데
So when I see
바울은
myself,
수없이
I'm not comparable to Paul. Paul went through a lot of difficulties and hardship.
왕들을 죄수의 몸으로 만나고 그랬는데
He met kings as a criminal.
바울만큼 믿음이 없어 그렇죠.
Although I'm not
못했을 때 어려움 없이 고난 없이 대통령을 만나고
I would have much difficulties. I met the president, and no matter who I meet,
바로 복음을 전했는데 한 두세 분 대통령에게는
two, three presidents,
신앙 이야기를 깊이 할 수가 없었습니다.
I couldn't talk about spiritual life.
또 다른
Some of them were Muslim,
마음에 예수 믿는 마음을 조금씩 표현하게 된다.
but I still expressed my heart.
그분의 대통령에게는 전 시간을 복음을 전하고 그렇게 했습니다.
But to most president, I preached the gospel. And the president that evening, he preached the word.
또 이번에 대통령께서 또좀 이렇게 코로나를 어렵다고 하셔서 전
Because recently the president told me that they are going through hardship because of COVID-19. So we sent them the medicine of Elder Huang.
저는 바울하고 비교가 안 되는 거예요. 지난 한 주간
Actually, this is not comparable to Paul, as we organize our program
전 세계에서
in a very easy way.
수백 개 방송국에서 방송을
Hundreds of thousands of broadcasting stations around the world, they televise their programs. So people of many countries, they heard the gospel and they got saved.
오늘 또 이제 그 국제도의
Today as well,
그 신학교 전 총장이었던 분이
I had an interview with the former principal, former chancellor of theology school in Cook Island. So we discussed what we are going to do in the future. We also discussed about the theology school there.
하나님께서 정말 정말 아무것도 아닌 저에게
So to me who am nothing,
예수님께서 나를 사랑해 내 죄를 사해 주셨습니다.
God, Jesus loved me so much and He washed my sins away.
복음을 전할 수 있도록 길을 열어주셨다.
But God opened the path for us to preach the gospel,
얼마나
and I'm so grateful to the Lord for His grace.
바울은 마지막에 이제 로마로 떠나기 전에 이스라엘 땅에 있을 때
Paul, before leaving Israel, people of Jerusalem, they wanted to kill Paul, and he got caught. That's when the members of the one of the relatives of Paul came to report the captain of thousands that people were trying to kill Paul. So he was brought before Caesar, and before that he met the governor Felix, because the Felix, the governor, he had a Jewess as a wife, so he met him many times and heard the word many times, and also met Festus, and also Agrippa the king. So after meeting all of them, they were headed for Rome.
로마로 가서 이제 막 배가 파손이 돼서 멜리데 섬 가까이 파손됐는데 마침 가까운 곳에 파손돼 가지고.
But the shipwreck near the Melita, the island, they swam, and those who cannot swim, they held onto some piece of wood, and they were able to be saved. So when he was brought to Rome, he was brought there with the status of criminal, the status of sinner, with a convict. So he had to stay prisoned in a house. But for me, after believing in Jesus, yesterday I went to Gwangju. After the morning worship, I went to Gwangju. I took SRT, the speed train. It didn't take me more than 2 hours. It took me less than 2 hours. It was so fast. I had taken it so many times, but it felt quicker yesterday. After the worship, after the evening worship, I got on the 9 o'clock train. We started the worship early in the night at 6 p.m. and we went out around 9 and took the train. And it took me less than 2 hours to come to Seoul. So I felt like I was around Seoul. But anyway, I could see God opening the path for us to preach the gospel, and I was so grateful to the Lord. And recently, this work of IYF and through Mind Education, we are meeting heads of states of many countries, and also today we met the former chancellor of the theology school in Cook Island. So he said he will also help us meet help us meet the prime minister. So I think God is opening the path for us to meet other prime minister as well. So as we see how God is opening the path for us to preach the gospel, actually, in fact, I'm living so well. I'm eating well. Yesterday we went to Gwangju, and the food they served me was so great. So among the gospel preachers in the Bible, who would have ate this kind of food? Paul would? I don't think so. I don't think Peter ate this kind of food. Especially Gwangju is near the sea. They have good seafood. So it was so touching. And we rode on the train, and I came back late in the night, and we were able to sleep peacefully. So as I do that, although I'm old in age, God gave me this healthy body, and
참 저는 믿음이 적은 사람이라서 믿음으로 잘 살지 못하지만
although I cannot live well by faith because I have not much faith, but when I see how God is working through me, I'm so grateful to see Him work.
얼마 전에 저희들 교회 병원 원장 되신 저를
A while ago in our church, he's a doctor in external medicine, and he examined my body, and he did about 20 tests, but I was so healthy. He said my body was as healthy as a young man. He said my blood is so clean. So I'm not doing anything particular. I'm just staying and doing the work of the gospel. I'm seeing how God is opening the path for me to preach the gospel and do the work of God. Paul, he went all the way to Rome, and he almost died. But as I visited many countries, I met the president of many countries, and I met ministers,
만나고 그러면서 하나님께 계속해서 복음을 문을 열어
and
주시고
I see how God is opening the path for us to preach the gospel,
지난 한 주간 동안 집회할 때는
especially for the past week when God bestowed grace upon us. I just spoke in details of what we used to talk about before, but that
똑같은 이야기를 했는데도
it's almost the same as what I talked about before. I just explained in more detail, but I saw many people they being so touched to hear that.
귀한 복음을 전하기 위해서 정말 제가
So in order to let us preach this gospel, after my salvation in 1962, I was one of the most pathetic person in the world. I was one of the weakest person in the world.
제가
But when I look back, my old days,
그다음 내년 되면 딱 60년
next year it's my 60th anniversary of after my salvation. After my salvation in 1962, and next year it's gonna be my 60th anniversary.
지난 60년 동안 내가 하고 싶은 이야기가
What I want to talk about for the past 60 years, it's not me who served God, but it was God who served me. I can see.
제가 재판받는 일이 있었는데
Once I had to stood trial.
난 큰 목사님
People that came and said, "Oh, Pastor, you should be ashamed. Why?
잘한 일입니까?
You standing trial. Do you think it's a good thing?
예수님도 재판받으시고
Even Jesus is to trial, and Paul's to trial too.
예수님하고 목사님 같습니까?
So you think you're the same as Paul?
그러나 재판받으시고
Of course we're different, but we still try for the same reason." I said.
예수님도 모함받아 재판받았고
Jesus was falsely accused, and I was also falsely accused.
예수님도 빌라도가 죄를 발견하지 못했다 그래서 저도
And
죄를 발견하지 못했다. 그들이 막
Pilate could not discover the sin of Jesus. It was the same thing for me.
너무 감사.
And when I see how God is protecting me, I'm so thankful.
예수를 안 믿고 예수님 안 믿고
If I had not believed
다른
Jesus,
직장을 가지면서 내가 나를 이렇게 지켜졌을까? 이렇게 건강할 수
if I had,
있었을까?
would I been able
이렇게
to
행복할 수가 있었을까?
be this happy?
정말 잘 살 수가 있었을까? 비교도 안 돼.
It was not comparable.
감사.
I was so thankful to the Lord.
아침에 일어나 아침 식사할 때
When I wake up in the morning and have breakfast, I'm sorry to tell you this, but
그래 좋아.
I like eating so much.
참 먹는 걸 좋아해.
I like eating so much.
아침을 먹 행복.
Whenever I have breakfast, I'm so happy.
따뜻한 아내가 지어준 음식.
You know,
우리 박영준 목사
warm food
어려울 때
that my wife prepared for me.
좋다 하는.
And Pastor Youngjun Park, when he came back, he said he was so thankful because I have a wife. He's preparing this good food for me.
자주 다툴 때도 있지만
Although from time to time we quarrel, and
아내가 우리가 살면서
as I live with my wife,
너무 감사.
I'm so thankful to be able to leave and work for the Lord.
우리가 예수 안에 있는 동안에
As we work in the Lord,
우리를 세워서
as we are in the Lord, I can see how He is letting us preach this gospel and be grateful.
우리 어떤 사람들은 정부가 인정해
Some
주는
people,
정부와 손을 잡고
they work with the government,
수많은 교도소 복음을 전할 수 길을 열어 주시고
and God opens the path for us to work with many government and work with school.
너무 좋은 거예요. 우리가 작년 그래 재작년이죠.
You know, last year
저희들이 한 해 동안에
for 1 year,
아니죠. 저 불어 계통에 우리 사역자들이 많이 모자라서
we needed more ministers of French-speaking ministers. So in order to train local ministers, so we invited about 50 pastors abroad in the French-speaking regions. Actually, we originally scheduled a 3-month-long program, but because of COVID-19, they stayed there for 5 months. One of them was pregnant, and she came to Korea, and she delivered her baby in Korea. And she said because she had the baby here in Korea, it was so good, she said.
대사님이 오셔서
And also even the ambassador came, and the ambassador gave me also an envelope full of money,
뭡니까 그쪽 나라
expressing his gratitude for helping the people of his country.
밀고 봉투를 주시더라.
So he also gave an envelope to all the participants of our programs, and we got very close to the ambassador. As we maintained this kind of relationship with ministers and also the governor of the city of Abidjan of Côte d'Ivoire,
우리 센터를 센터를 지어 주려고 지금
He
하고
is
있고
preparing to build our center for us,
이렇게 정부하고 손을 맞추어서 마인드 교육을 통해 복음을
and
전하고
as we are
그다음에
working with
복음을 보통 목회자들 교육을 하고 또 구원받은 성도들 교육을 하고
and we're also
구원받은
training
목회자
members of
저희들
the
신학교가 있는데
church, and we also
8,300명
started
목회자들이 저희들 신학교에서 공부하는 대부분 목회자들이에요.
and most
너무
pastors studying.
감사하고
There are about 8,000
저는
student
잘할 수
pastors
있는
are
아무것도
learning in
없는데
our school. They are all
하나님께서
pastors.
길을
Although I'm not
열고
good
안
at
그래도 제가
anything, but I can
우리의
see how God
복음을
is opening the path for
전하겠는데
us to preach the gospel.
복음
Otherwise,
전할
how can I
때마다
preach the
막
gospel like
힘이
this?
없고 감사가 넘치는 거예요.
And I'm so thankful to see
우리가
God
작년에
working through
엘살바도르
us.
대통령 못
Last year, I couldn't
만났는데
meet the president of El
다음에
Salvador.
기회를 봐서
The
한번
next
제가
time, if I have a
만나기로
chance, I would like to meet
준비하고
him.
있습니다만은
I'm preparing,
그 대통령께서
although I'm
저를
preparing
만나기
to meet him,
원하시다 그랬는데
the president wanted to meet me
그때
then.
멕시코 신학대학 총장께서 그 엘살바도르 대통령하고 가까운 친구라서
Also, the principal of the theology school in Mexico was very close to the president of El Salvador, so they invited me to come to see the president, but I couldn't meet him. But anyway, I met all the four other presidents. I was so happy to meet other presidents.
하나님께서 저 같은 왜 대통령과 장관을 만나게
I wondered why would God let me meet those presidents. I think it was to preach the
왕
gospel.
되신 분들이 복음을 듣고
And all those who became president and all those
영향을 주시더라고요.
became president when they heard the gospel, their influence was great. Especially as the king of Eswatini received salvation, he gave us land, he helped us do the construction, and he said, "Oh, Pastor, build your house here. Pastor, build in this house." So because of COVID-19, for the past year, I couldn't see him then.
이런 복음을 계속 전해가면서 이 나라를
But as we preach the gospel,
차기를 기뻐하시더라고요.
I can see how God is so happy to
그래서 우리가 복음을 그 나라에 가득 채우기에 부족함이 없도록
so that we would be more than able to fill up the country with the hand of the gospel. When I see when we see the hand of the Lord upon us, we are so thankful as well.
잘하는 게 아무것도 없지만은
Although I'm not good at anything,
제3을 받고 구원받고 난 뒤에
but as I received salvation in 1962,
뜻하지 않게 저희들 교회에서 제3 받아야 한다고 막 떠들고 하다가 교회에서
in our church,
따돌림을 당하고
when I first received salvation, I talked about the gospel, but I was isolated,
친구들도 저를 이상하게 보고 그랬는데
and also my friends, they looked at me with strange eyes, with doubtful eyes.
우리 같이 청년들이
And once
오는 방이 있는데
there was a room where our young people of the church got together and to talk and hang out. And when I held the doorknob, I could hear many people inside, and I heard people they talking about me. Oh, Pastor Ock Soo Park is such a punk. He's a funny guy. I know him, but he says he doesn't have a sin. And I almost opened the door and wanted to go walk inside and say, "What did you just say?" But I just let go of the doorknob and I came out.
내가 가까이 지내던 친하던
There were many friends that were close to me. I didn't know anybody else but the people of the church, but they all isolated me, and it was very painful to me. And I was so lonely, and it was so painful. But not long later,
놀랍게도 우리가 있는 선산에
in Sunsan, where I was,
한 분이 와 계시면서
one Dutch missionary came, and as we got connected to him from the mission,
선교학교를 시작하게 됐어요.
they started missionary school. Those
그
missionaries.
선교학교에 그 연결이 돼서 가서
And as we got connected to that mission school,
선교학교 훈련 마치고
we were
난 뒤에
trained there. And after the training,
all
all other people, all other trainees, they were invited.
집에 가기 싫더라고요.
But I didn't want it to go anywhere else.
한번 그 지나가다가 그 동네 내 노방 전담을 해본 경험이 있는 동네인데
And so I had nowhere to go because nobody invited me. But then I remembered one place where we went to witness once.
처음으로
So I went there in Apgokdong to do the work of the gospel, and people they arose there from there to receive salvation. And the sister who received salvation, she changed so much,
나이가
and she was
2살 더 많은
22 years old, older than me.
21살이었고
I was only 21 years old back then,
22살 더 많은
and she was 20 years older than me.
같았으면은 결혼했었는지 모를 정도로 사랑했어요.
And we loved each other so much, although she had husband, but I loved her so much
그 뒤에 이제
as a sister. And
떠나신 지
if we were young enough, we had not if she had not gotten married, I would have married her. She was so precious and she worked hard so well for the work of the
많은
gospel,
가민들을 통해 구원받고 병도 많이
and so many people they changed.
그 아드님이 한번 어머니 내갖고 이야기하니까 어머니가 아버지는 앞을 못 보시고 혼자 우리
And once I met the son and I talked about
다 키우지만
the mother,
늘 불평했다.
and actually the mother used to be very sensitive because she was always very she always was complaining about about the situation because they could not take good care of their children. But once to sell her stuff, she came to Apgokdong. She stopped by, and
말씀을 전하게.
and she heard the gospel there. She got saved, and although she didn't want to do the work of the gospel when I was going to leave Apgokdong, but I told him in a letter take an oath, and that's when she went and preached the work of the gospel. Although she was not good at Korean because she was from Japan, she kept telling me that, oh, Pastor, I'm not good at this. I don't want this. I told the sister, are you ignoring me? Are you despising me because I'm young? She said, no, Pastor, I'm not despising you.
그 자매님 평생에
And all her life
큰 산 속에서
in deep mountain, as she was running the small church, she saved many people. She saved many people who were demon possessed,
전도자도 여러 명 일어나.
and many workers of the gospel they got saved.
나에게도 구원받는 사람이 일어나네.
Oh, even through me, people are being saved.
압곡동에 있을 때
That was when I was in Apgokdong.
4개월 동안 한 명도 구원받은 사람.
Nobody got saved for the first 4 months.
여자 청년들
It was just some young students,
구원받았고
young ladies who got saved, and then some old ladies, and Sister Son got saved. And through Sister Son, I could see God work amazingly through her. And her son said,
짜증내고 막
before then she used to complain, she used to
엄마가 달라지는
get mad, and she used to be picky. But after she heard the gospel, the son could see how his mother changed. His mother changed so much.
제가 복음 전한 사람한테 뭐 벌써 먼저 저보다 먼저 하늘나라 가신 분들이 여러 분 계시고
There are many people who've gone to heaven before me, and I think I will join them soon.
이게 늘도록 주님이 건강한 몸도 주시고
But I'm so thankful to the Lord for giving me this healthy body,
이런 길을
and I'm so thankful for Him to opening the path for us.
하나님께서 우리 한 사람 한 사람 단 말씀이 그렇습니다.
So that's the word. When son of Jesse, David son of Jesse is a man after mine own heart. We are not supposed to be good at anything else.
그래서 하나님의 마음을 정확하게 파악하고 내 마음을
When we see the heart of God, when you put our heart together with the heart of God,
우리를 쓰시기를 기뻐.
God is pleased to use us for His work.
만일에 하나님이 우리를 들어 쓰시기로 작정하셨다.
If God makes up His heart to work for us,
무슨 일을 해도
no matter what we do,
문제가 안 돼.
it wouldn't matter.
저는 예수님 안에서 60여 년 사는 동안
For the past 60 years that I lived in the Lord,
땅이 아파서
sometimes I had stomach ache. I went through difficulties.
99년 심장이 그때는 아파서 미국 가서 세계 유명한 심장 전문의가 보고 못 고친다는
I also once went to the United States and see the specialist of hearts, but he couldn't heal me, treat me. But in 1999, in the month of July, my heart was totally healed then. And from time to time, as the Oriental doctor of Elder Huang of our church, he would check my pulse and say, "Oh, my heart is very good and healthy."
이렇게 건강하게 오래 살 줄 몰랐는데
I never thought that I would live this healthy and this well. I'm so thankful for His grace,
집회를 통해
especially through last conference that we had.
깜짝 놀라면서
Ministers of the gospel of the world around the world, they are so surprised,
이런 일을 하시는
and they have their hearts open toward us.
정말 처음엔 이게 꿈인가 생신
And when I heard people being amazed at it, I wondered if this is true or if I'm not dreaming or something.
신적이고
But when I see I'm so weak and I'm so fleshly,
그동안 저를 지키시고
but God loved me and He changed me so much,
도우시면서
and God
복음의
saved me. He did work of the gospel through me, and I'm so thankful to the Lord.
아르헨틴에 있는 그 목사님은 아르헨틴 남극에다 교회를 개척했어요. 땅 끝이라 그럽니다.
In Argentina, in South Pole, we started a church there. So pastor of Argentina, he invited me there. They said this is the end of the land. Once the senator of Anchorage visited our church, so he talked to me. I preached the gospel to him for about 30 minutes. Especially, they're very thankful about us. When the minister, when they first came to Korea as a soldier, they were only 18, 17 years old. So when they came to Korea as a soldier, I was only 7 years old back then. So they were about 13 years old or older than me, or 10 years old older than me. Because they're 13 years older than me now. They're 80 something now. They're 89 years old. So most of them, they have passed away. And only about 10 of them are still alive. They said that even if the war breaks out again in Korea, if they were young again, they would fight for Korea, they said. Because of them, we were able to live this well. And I'm so thankful to see God working. When I see God working through us, what is He happy of? He washed all our sins on the cross. But people, when they hear, "Oh, Pastor Ock Soo Park, what are you doing? Oh, just go preach the gospel." God, I think the Lord is chastising me to go preach the word of God as soon as possible. Although I'm not a droid, I'm weak, but God keeps opening the path for me. I don't think I keep my spiritual life for the past 60 years. Sometimes there are young ministers who run away. There are one or two of them. I understand. Also in my life, I wondered if I'd be able to continue to do this kind of work. There were times like that too. But as the Lord, I'm so thankful that I was able to preach the gospel until today. Today is the last hour, but as we read chapter 25, the Felix, the governor, and Felix, the governor, and King Agrippa, and all these kings and leaders, people of authority, Paul met them, and he could have said, "Oh, please help me, I have no sin," instead of saying all that. Each time he stood before them, he preached the gospel, and when I see how he did that, this is so amazing and beautiful. Oh, Felix did not, although Felix and Pharaoh didn't seem to receive salvation, but also they stood before God later. They came to discover what Christianity is, and they came to discover who Paul really was. He was not a bad person. God is with him, and I can see how they must have had that kind of heart. So in chapter 26 and 27, it talks about the testimony of Paul. King Agrippa later says, "Oh, Paul, you are crazy. Your knowledge made you crazy." Actually, he was really living a kind of life that people may accuse him of being crazy, because he didn't take care of himself. He didn't look after himself. He just believed for the gospel alone. And before going to Jerusalem, he knew that he was going to get arrested, as the prophets had prophesied. And many members of the church told him not to go into Jerusalem. Then Paul said, "Why do you cry and hurt my heart? I know I'm even ready to die in Jerusalem." As he's saying that, you can see how he's going to Rome. So we are seeing how Paul is going for Rome now, and Paul kept preaching the gospel, and this precious work that God did through Paul. This was so amazing. If we try to protect ourselves and work for ourselves, that must be very foolish to do that.
저는 어려운 일이 생길 때
Whenever you go through difficulties and problems,
내가 하지 아니고 하나님이 하신다면
instead of I doing it, but if the Lord does it for us, there is nothing better than that.
여러분 아이들의 장래,
The future of your children,
사역자 나이 들어간 노후,
and also the old days of our pastors.
어떻게 살까?
Oh, if I grow old, how am I gonna make my living, do my living?
살까?
Where am I gonna live?
여러분 우리가 그 염려 또한 염려 못해.
While we worry about that, God cannot worry. God cannot take care of us. Instead of worrying about our future, if we think about the gospel, the Lord would work for us. Once my aunt was going to Presbyterian church, she said,
자꾸 뭐 박옥수 목사가 뭐 잘못됐다 그런 이야기 하고.
she said things like, "Oh, Pastor Ock Soo Park is doing wrong," and I went to visit her because she was saying those things.
누가 그런 이야기 하고.
And she told our family members that I embezzled, and I asked her who said that, and she said, "Oh, I saw people saying that." So because she's older than me, she's elderly, I cannot fight her.
큰 교회에 있다면 월급을
But later she said, "Oh, Pastor Park, I heard that you are in a big church.
모아가지고
Oh, bring me the salary, then I'll buy an apartment for you later.
아파트 사는 나이 많은 할매보다 내가 더 잘 살지.
And if we buy an apartment, I'll be better than old lady, right?"
그 내가 이제 나오면서
But as I came out,
아파트 하나 사볼까는 그런 마음이 들어요.
I felt like,
샀어요.
actually in my heart, I bought an apartment in my heart.
박 목사
But it's not, if I felt like, "Oh, Pastor Park, you are well prepared for your future, for your old days, and I don't have to help you then, right?" And I almost fainted when I came to think that.
내가 아파트 하나 만들어 놓고 예수님 없으면
I may have an apartment, but if I have no Jesus with me, then which is better?
지금까지 나를 이끄신 예수님,
The Lord who helped me until now,
지금까지 나를 도와주신 예수님,
the Lord who helped me until now,
지금까지 나에게 은혜를 베푸신 그 예수님.
Jesus who helped me until now, who bestowed His grace upon me until now.
왕자라도
No matter what prince, or no matter what a son of a president,
그동안 이제 섬세하게 지키시고
we can see how God is
심장이 아파 고통했을 때 위장을 값없이
taking care of us precisely.
심장이 아파 고통할
And when I had a heart problem, when I had a stomach problem, God healed my stomach.
여러분 어려움을 당할 때마다
And each time we went through
내 마음이
difficulties,
어려움에 빠지고
my heart may fall into difficulties.
하나님이 힘을 주 내 마음의 어려움을 이기게
God gave me strength and let me overcome those difficulties.
이제 저도 나이가 많아졌습니다.
And now I'm old in age.
얼마 더 사는지 모르겠어요.
I don't know how long I would live from now on.
너무 재밌는 나라가
But Korea, such a
옛날 평균 연령이 얼마 안 됐는데
before the average lifespan was not
내가 죽을 때 가까운
big,
20년 이상 평균.
but now I'm close to my end day, my end. But average lifespan increased by 20 years. So I think we're gonna maybe in soon our average lifespan will go up to maybe 100. Maybe I will then live up to 100 years old. I'm just thinking like that.
하나님께서 하나에서 열이면 열, 백이면 백.
But anyway, from 1 to
내가 날
100,
위해 뭐 일하고 내가 나를 지키려고 했던 것하고
versus what I did for myself, versus what God did for me, these two are not comparable. What God did for me is way better than what I did for myself.
한마디도 안 하더라.
Paul never said anything for himself.
왕 앞에나 총독 앞에나
Before the governor, before the prime minister, before the captain of thousand,
때가 되면
each time he
자기 생각하는
had a
왕
chance,
총독 불쌍하게 복음 전하려고.
he found the governor pitiful and he tried to preach the gospel to the captain of thousand.
바울이 바울을 지키는 것하고
So Paul protecting himself versus God protecting Paul.
내가
God protecting him was way better.
애를 쓰고 의를 행하고
No matter how we may try to protect ourselves,
예수님 날 위해 준비한 의하고 비교가 안 되고
what God has prepared for us is much better.
되기 때문에 내가 주님을 위해 살고
So as we live for the Lord,
주님을 내 자신 드리면 주의 모든 게 내 것이 되기 때문에
because
삶에 너무나 복되고
oh, you can see how everything
하나님께서 우리를 사랑하셔서
As God loves us,
우리를 구원해 주시고
He helped us and
하나님
saved
우리
us.
속에 그 귀한 은혜와 긍휼을 베푸셔서
As He bestowed
지키시고
His grace upon
도우셔서
us, and as He helped us,
감사합니다.
and I'm so thankful for His grace.
저희 아들을 딸에게 어릴 때 마인드 교육을 가르쳤습니다.
I taught mind education to my son and daughter. I taught them
그다음에
self-control.
서로 이렇게 사고하는 방법을 가르치고
I taught them how to think and how to communicate.
제가 제 아들이 있고 며느리가 딸이 있지만
I have a daughter, I have a
그
son.
아이들이 내가 이제 나이가 많으니까 기억력도 적고 그래서 뭐 아이들 볼 때는
Because I'm old in age,
늙었는데
in the eyes of my kids, I look old.
나를 거스리거나 내가 왜 아버지 그렇게 해서
But they never spoke against me. They never disobeyed me. I'm so grateful for that.
다른 집 아이들 부자 잘 살면 자식들하고 싸우고 재산
Many kids in the world, they fight with their siblings because of the
아들에게 딸에게
possessions of their parents.
예수님 만나기 그것보다 큰 재산이 어디 있습니까?
And there's nothing better than meeting Jesus as a possession,
하나님께서 도우신 거예요.
as heritage. And I'm so thankful to see God working for us.
이번에 한번 재판을 봤는데 뉴욕에 내 아들
Once
사는 집을 누가 사진 찍어요.
I was standing trial, but someone took the picture of the house where my son was living, and
제 아들
the prosecutor showed me the picture and said, "Do you know this house?" I know. I know.
내가 돈 주고 사놓은 집인 줄 알았을까?
And they said, "Do you pay the rent?"
왜안 내느냐고.
I said, "No, we don't pay the rent." "Why not?" The prosecutor asked me.
교회 집에 사는 집세 내겠네.
As the pastor lives in the church, does he pay the rent? No.
뉴욕에 외부의 손님들이 오면 있을 데가 없고 한국 손님 많이
Because when people they come to visit us in New York,
있나 그래서
we needed some place where they could stay, so we had some houses. But the houses were so expensive, they changed the title. They changed the document. It all belonged to the church. Otherwise, they would have maybe accused me of having many houses. But because they were all under the name of the house, they couldn't say anything about it.
고발하려고 누가 그 미국까지 가서 그 집
Some people, in order to accuse me, they went all the way to New York and they took the picture of our house.
너무너무 감사했어. 그들이
So I was so thankful.
막 그랬는데 손끝만한 거 하나 찾지 못하고
But they couldn't find any fault, any flaws.
지금 막 검사가 지금 재판을 받고
Now the prosecutor who accused me, she is now undergoing a trial, and I'm so grateful for the Lord.
속에 세상 사람 다 죽어도 죽지 않는 분 한 분 계세요. 하나님 살아계세요.
People of the world, they may die, but there's one that doesn't die. That's God. When we die,
바라보는 사람 중 그런
how
영원히
how vain that is. But God is always alive. As the last chapter of Matthew, the last verse, it says, "I'll be with you until the end of the world." It says.
그래서 정말 그 예수님 앞에 내 남은 인생을 드리고
So as I give my life to that Lord,
예수님을 지킨다면
and if that Lord protects my life, there will be nothing more perfect than that.
딴건 몰라도 예수님이
I don't know anything else, but in order to let Jesus work for me, I didn't prepare anything for my old days. I'm just living like this.
그렇게 사는데
But as I live like this,
이 아파트 사주려고 막 교회에서 장로들이 막 그랬는데
there were some members of some elders who wanted to buy a house, an apartment for me, but I told them not to. If I have an apartment, I told them to buy an apartment for all the pastors, so they didn't.
좋은 밥을 먹고 좋은 차를 타고 좋은 삶을 살면서
As we are living good life,
복음의 길을 열어 주셔서
and as I see how God is opening the path for us, we are so thankful to see God
사도행전 읽어보면서
as we read the book of Acts.
CTN 방송 끝나기 때문에 새로운 그 녹화를 해야
As we are done with CTN, we have to record new videos.
하면
So today and tomorrow we're gonna do it. I think we'll be done with the book of Acts,
27장,
where
28장 세 개 장이 남았는데
we have 3 chapters left: 26, 27, 28.
잘 전하지 못해
Although I'm not good at preaching, but I'm sorry.
죄송해요. 너무 힘이 돼.
But this gives me so much power to preach the word.
우리 앞에 간 주의 종 바울이나 베드로
And also the Paul and Peter who went before us,
부족한
they were
종이라서
imprisoned,
복이
and
안
but
가고
because I'm
감옥
not,
안 가고
because I'm lacking servant, God didn't send me to prison.
하는 게 너무
I still have, God gave me enough food. I'm so thankful for it.
교회 안에 구원받은 장로님들이
And also the
자매들이
members,
마음으로 교회를 위해서 일한 게 너무 아름답고
when I see God working in the church and doing this precious work, I'm so thankful to our brothers and sisters.
우리나라에 새로운 많은 전도자들이 일어나서
More
이를 이어서
ministers of the gospel would arise from our church and grow as precious workers of the gospel.
주님 오실
And
때까지
until the day that Jesus comes,
참된 복음을 전하는
they would preach this precious gospel. I hope that these workers would continue to rise from our church,
한 사람 한 사람은 말미암아
and through those precious servants,
하나님 제일 기뻐할 게 뭐겠습니까?
what would he be pleased of?
가장 기뻐하실
Oh, he saved. I think that's what he would be pleased of the most.
주여 죄인입니다 하는
There's so many people just saying, "Oh, I'm sinner, Lord," but how much he would feel stuffy about it.
기쁘시게 하고 예수님의 피가 헛되지 않고 죄에서 건져냈더니 놀라운 사를 전해서
But he saved us.
이런 복음을 전하시네.
So as we preach this gospel,
더
we're so thankful.
여러분 세계 주님부터 가까이 가서 나를 위해 사는 시간 적어지고
And as we leave less for ourselves, and we spend less time for ourselves, and we work less for ourselves. But as we do more work for the Lord, and when we give ourselves for the Lord, and as God lead us, I think there will be nothing more blessed than that.
말할 수 없는 고난, 핍박, 상상할 수 없는 어려움을 겪습니다.
Paul went through a lot of hardship and difficulties.
이렇게 복된 삶을 살기 보면 때로 미안하고 부끄럽기도 합니다만은
Sometimes I'm ashamed, sometimes I'm not good enough.
앞에서 왕 앞에 총독 앞에서 잘 변명하지 않고 복음만 전하고
But Paul didn't excuse, or didn't speak for himself, but he just did the work of, he just tried to preach the gospel to them. And I'm so thankful to see God who let us do this precious work. Well, thank you. We'll see you next time again. Take care.